The producer Ferhat Alani has made an excellent feature film about Fallujah, which explains the cause of the increases in congenital malformations in Fallujah, Iraq. And when we tried to put this up on YouTube, it was immediately taken down. So within 2 minutes of it being put up on YouTube, it disappeared with a message saying that the copyright was held by Canal Plus, which is a French company, a TV company, which funded the production of this film. So you can't see it. Anyway, I mean, in order to make sure that you can see it, I strongly advise you to put it down and to watch it, because it's a very, very powerful film. And you have to ask the question why it was that it was taken off so rapidly. And when you look at it closely and you try to figure out why it was taken off so quickly, the answer is perfectly clear, because the people who took it down don't want it to be shown in the United States so people can find out the cause of the congenital malformations in Iraq, which is the uranium weapons that were used in Iraq by the US-led forces in 2004. So Ferhat travels to Fallujah and he interviews various people there and discovers that there is in fact a large increase in congenital malformations there. I have been involved in 3 papers now which are in the peer-reviewed literature, showing that there is this increase in congenital malformation and also a big increase in cancer. So we're looking for something that causes congenital malformations and cancer, and of course uranium fits the bill. In fact, there's nothing else that we found when we looked in the hair of the parents with congenital malformation that could have possibly caused the congenital malformations. Anyway, Ferhat goes there, and then he comes here to Wales, to Aberystwyth, here, to talk to me about the measurements that we made where we found the uranium in the hair, and it was slightly enriched uranium, incidentally, which raises another load of questions. And then he went off to the United States and he talked to Doug Rockey, who was in the military in charge of decontamination after the first Gulf War, and who is now suffering from all sorts of diseases as a result of his exposure to depleted uranium weapons as they then were. And he talks to people from the Pentagon and from and also interestingly to an American Gulf veteran called Gerard Matthews, who is also suffering, and this is Gulf War II, 2003 veteran, who is also suffering from all sorts of dreadful diseases, and whose daughter has the same sort of congenital malformation that are being picked up in Iraq. So anyway, watch this film and realise that there is a big cover-up of the effects of these weapons, and pressure has to be brought on the authorities and on the military to stop using these weapons and to investigate the whole issue. Because I have to say that there is a large amount of uranium circulating in the atmosphere now. So it's not just a question of people in Fallujah. It's also people in Iraq and people in Europe and people in the United States. The concentration of uranium in high-volume air samplers at the Atomic Weapons Research Establishment in Aldermaston, Berkshire, so we can actually monitor the levels of uranium in the atmosphere, and these levels have been just consistently rising ever since the first Gulf War. So have a look at the film, download it if you can and disseminate it all over the place, because it could well be that it will be taken down from Vimeo, because there's a big powerful machine out there to try and rubbish all this and to keep the evidence of this away from people. And bring pressure to bear on your senators and congressmen and members of parliament or any powerful people or people with authority or influence to see if you can get this whole affair opened up and this issue raised in such a way that these weapons are banned. Thank you.
Fallujah, west of Baghdad. The rebels' bastion seems to be awakening the day after an earthquake. 8 years after the war, its inhabitants are still living among the ruins. At Fallujah Hospital, doctors are fighting another war. Today, as every day, the maternity unit is on alert. A deformed baby has just been born, the 5th this week. This newborn is suffering from serious malformations. The doctors think he will survive, but he may never be able to walk.
From the office side, he needs an operation. At the moment, he's much too weak for us to move forward with surgery. So we have him on observation. We have seen many other types of deformities. He's not alone. Some are more severe than others. We have some babies born without skulls, without organs, and sometimes with their legs totally twisted. Oh, look at his little legs.
The mother of this baby is in shock. This woman has had 3 children before this one, all born without any health problems. This deformed baby is the first such case in her family. But there's a dramatic rise in such phenomena. In Fallujah, 1 birth in 5 now exhibits congenital malformation. This doctor sees only one possible solution, and it is radical.
I advise the older women in Fallujah city to not have more babies.
How did it come to this? All these babies were born after 2004, when Fallujah endured one of the most violent battles ever witnessed on Iraqi soil. Bombs and shells rained down on the city for several weeks. 15,000 coalition soldiers were marshaled to crush Fallujah. Facing them were 2,000 Iraqi resistance fighters armed with Kalashnikovs and rocket launchers. The U.S. Air Force dropped hundreds of tons of bombs. These pictures show fireballs falling on the city. This is white phosphorus, a chemical incendiary weapon. Today, this bombing is said to have caused the malformations in the children of Fallujah. These traffic jams are an indicator of peace in Iraq. The city seems revived, with businesses springing up once again, and residents doing their shopping in the city center. A city center that is returning to its pre-war opulence. But is the war really over? Though the situation in Baghdad has improved, other cities have been tossed into the garbage. Fallujah, for instance, my parents' hometown. After the war, the city was totally cut off. Only the inhabitants had the right to come and go freely.
Hello.
Assalamu alaikum. But I have family and friends there, and I speak Iraqi Arabic. I make contact with a friend in Fallujah.
Come at 3 o'clock. Close to the statue. I'll come and pick you up and we'll go wherever you want.
This is Abu Yunus. He's 32 years old, a former football player for Fallujah, now unemployed. I first met him while doing a news report 4 years ago. It was he who called my attention to these seriously deformed babies. He came to Baghdad to fetch me because it's not possible for me to get to Fallujah without his help. This road is closely monitored. In traveling the 50 kilometers that separate Baghdad from Fallujah, we go through more than 20 checkpoints. The city is located in the middle of the Sunni Triangle, also called the Triangle of Death by the Americans. Some 1,500 U.S. soldiers have been killed in this region, 1/3 of the American casualties in Iraq.
Fallujah was the first city to fight back against American occupation. It found fame by throwing them out of town and inflicting great loss of life. So much so that the people wondered how a small city like Fallujah could resist against the world's most powerful army.
In March 2004, 4 mercenaries under contract to the U.S. Army were killed in their vehicle on the outskirts of town. Their mutilated bodies were dragged through the streets, then hung under this bridge as trophies. It was one of the very first acts of violence against the United States. These pictures were soon seen all over the world. It was the start of an escalation that culminated in the Battle of Fallujah in November 2004. The death toll listed 134 GIs and 3,500 Iraqis. Fallujah became a symbol of the revolt. Accordingly, the army imposed very strict checks in the city. The fingerprints and retina scans of every last inhabitant were recorded in U.S. Army files. Never has any town undergone such treatment. Residents were even issued with biometric ID cards.
This badge enables me to enter and leave Fallujah.
7 years later, the badges are no longer needed. The city is now under the control of the Iraqi army, but Fallujah remains the hardest place in the country to get into.
You need a guarantor to enter, and he must be from Fallujah. I've been asked to be responsible for you for safety reasons.
So you can't just walk into Fallujah?
No, not like that.
As we approach the city, the tension mounts in the car.
No, stop filming. Put the camera down.
Here we are at the entrance to Fallujah, 100 meters from a border post within the country. The Iraq army is checking each car that passes. To take in a camera, you'd need special permission and an armed escort. But to give us freedom of movement, we'd rather enter illegally.
There are several cars in front of us. We're in the third one. We're ready. Come and fetch us.
Thanks to Abu Yunus, one of the soldiers lets us through. For his own safety, we don't film him. After an hour's wait, we finally pass through the checkpoint. Welcome to Fallujah. 300,000 inhabitants, considered the most dangerous city in Iraq. Nothing here has really changed since the battle. Life goes on. The streets are teeming, but the traces of war are still here. And the Iraqi soldiers carry on patrolling. In this prison town, it's hard to keep a low profile if you're carrying a camera. So to keep us safe as we move around within Fallujah, Abu Yunus follows close behind. He'll be our guardian angel. This neighborhood is one of the hardest hit by the bombing. Half the buildings are in ruins. Not one wall has been spared by bullets. This former Iraqi soldier was in the city during the American assault. He lives just opposite this building, totally destroyed. During the bombing, he noticed suspicious explosions.
Just after the bombing began, the landscape changed. Even the appearance of the sky changed. The sky became kind of yellow. It lasted for several days. Even the explosions were abnormal. Now, I'm a fighter. I was an officer in the Iraqi army under the old regime. I fought for 7 years in the war against Iran. So bombs and missiles, I've seen a lot of them. I know what I'm talking about. But with these American bombs, it was different. They exploded and they produced something abnormal, something that I don't think I've ever seen before.
The strange bomb that this resident refers to contained white phosphorus, a chemical incendiary weapon often compared to the napalm used in Vietnam. According to the Geneva Convention, civilians and civilian objects may not be attacked in any circumstances by incendiary bombs. Basically, the use of white phosphorus is banned in any populated zones. The American Army claims to have used it only to illuminate combat zones. Yet in Fallujah, thousands of inhabitants were still in the city during the bombing. Abu Yunus arranges to meet me at the Martyrs Cemetery, the former football stadium. 3,500 bodies are buried here. Resistance fighters and civilians alike. This is where Abu Yunus played football. Today, he comes to meditate at the graves of former teammates, now become martyrs.
Some of the footballers who used to play in this stadium are buried here. Even the coach, we called him Khalil Cowboy. Even he was killed by the Americans. In all, I think 13 players from the Fallujah team are buried in their own football ground.